ashes of Caliban. There is a silence in the stars, a silence not born of peace but of aftermath, the kind that follows when voices are lost, not stilled. Across the broken void where once the proud banners of the First Legion had flown, there is only the echo of betrayal repeating through the warp like a fading scream. The ruin of Caliban hangs heavy in orbit, its shattered fragments caught in the pale light of a dying sun. Debris drifts like ghosts, silent gravestones for an age of forgotten honor. Once a verdant world cloaked in ancient forests, Caliban had been the crucible of knights and the birthplace of a legend. Now, it is hollow stone and scorched memory, floating in pieces around the heart of its shame. Upon a broken platform of steel and bone, watching through the smoked glass viewport of an ancient obsidian chamber, stands a figure unmoving. Clad in the solemn green of the unforgiven, his armor is chipped with age but polished with ritual. The wings of the emperor upon his chest have faded to brass, worn down by time or by guilt. He is Master Azrael, keeper of the truth, last bearer of the lion's original blade. His eyes, unhelmed and stern, reflect only shadow. His hands, gloved, ceremonial, tighten as if he could hold the past in place by force alone. They had called themselves the First Legion, the Dark Angels, chosen before the stars were tamed. And yet now, after 10,000 years of twilight, their name was spoken only in whispers, not for glory, but for secrets, for a sin buried beneath 1,000 lies, for a truth no one dared speak aloud. He is not dead, Azrael thought. He cannot be. The lion, the Primarch, the Saviour, the exile, had vanished in the final days of the great heresy. Legends whispered that he slumbered in the dark core of the rock, the last remnant of Caliban. Others said he had wandered the Imperium itself, cursed to walk until absolution came. But Azrael had read the records, those torn from the vaults of the Librarius long before the doors were sealed. He had seen the evidence not of sleep, but of departure, and worse, of choice. Behind him, the door hissed. The chamber's sacred stillness broke like ice beneath a bootstep. "Forgive the intrusion, my lord," came the voice, low, aged, and full of the weight of too many wars. Interrogator Chaplain Malak rose from the shadow, his skull-faced helm tucked beneath one arm, the other gripping a data slate too delicate to be mundane. Azrael did not turn. He knew the look in Malak's eyes without needing to see it, pity sharpened by truth. "You bring news." "Confirmation," Malak replied, stepping closer. The signal from the ghoul stars was genuine. It bore the seal of the lion himself. Azrael's breath caught. Malak paused, voice gentling. "He lives." The silence returned, but it was no longer peaceful. It was trembling with something older than time, a terrible, aching hope, one that carried more danger than any enemy fleet. Hope, in the hearts of the unforgiven, had always been a poison. "And where does it lead?" Azrael asked. "A ruined bastion deep within the old empire of the Rangdan, unmapped, hidden behind warp storms. No one has gone there since the dark," Azrael finished quietly. "Since the darkest night in the Legion's history, since Luther's betrayal." Malak bowed his head. He had served through centuries of silence, endured the rituals of confession and pain, and still the name of the traitor made him flinch. "You think it a trap?" Azrael asked. "I think." Malak hesitated. "My lord, I believe the lion is calling us, but not all will see it that way. The inner circle must be told, and there are those who will resist, those who fear the truth more than death." "Truth," Azrael murmured, the word foreign on his tongue. For 10,000 years, the First Legion had operated under a different banner than the one they once bore. Beneath their oaths to the Emperor was a darker vow: to seek out the fallen, those brothers who had turned against the Lion during Caliban's schism. They had hunted them in silence, never revealing the true reason for their crusades. They had tortured, executed, and erased their own. And now the Lion might live. But to what end? Would he forgive them? Or judge? Azrael finally turned, locking eyes with Malak. Then we must go to him. My lord, we follow the signal. Quietly. Tell no one outside the inner circle. The rest of the chapter must not know. Not until we understand what it is we are truly walking into. He stepped past the chaplain, brushing ancient dust from the hem of his robes. And if it is not the Lion? Malak asked. Azrael paused at the threshold. Then it is the beginning of our end. Far across the galaxy, beyond the reach of astropathic chorus and navigational certainty, a light flickered within the ruin of a fortress monastery, half swallowed by alien stone. Inside, stasis fields hummed like breathing gods. Technology older than any current mechanicus doctrine pulsed with slow glacial rhythm. At the heart of it stood a single plinth of black marble, cracked with veins of silver. Upon it, a figure lay, not dead, but still, not aged but timeless, the Lion. His armor was blackened by battle, carved with wounds both physical and psychic. His face, once noble and cruel, was drawn now in solemn sleep or deep meditation. Around him, statues of fallen brothers watched, stone effigies of those long dead, but remembered still. A figure approached, cloaked in green so dark it was nearly void. His voice was low, almost reverent. They come, my lord, the figure whispered. At last they come. The Lion did not move, but somewhere in the space between seconds, his fingers twitched, and a storm, long silent, began to rise. In the cold halls of the rock, where starlight struggled to reach and silence reigned like a monarch, Azrael stood before the sealed vault of the Librarius. Hibai stared at the door's ancient runes, wards of truth and memory, etched with pain and penance. Inside were the records of Caliban's last night, the recordings of Luther's words. The final messages sent before orbital bombardment had ended a brotherhood. He had read them once, as a young watcher, but he had never understood. Now he feared he did. You knew, didn't you? Azrael whispered to the stone. You knew what you would become. What we would become. A flicker of motion in the corner of his eye. A watcher in the dark, small, hooded, silent, vanished as quickly as it came. The Emperor's chosen had never truly understood the depths of the First Legion's burden. And perhaps that was the point. Perhaps some truth could not be spoken, only lived and died for. The rock rumbled, the engines of translation beginning their charge. Azrael turned away. The past calls, he said to himself, and we must answer, even if it damns us. The stars beyond flickered like dying eyes, watching the First Legion begin to stir once more. But whether for redemption or annihilation, only time would tell. The weight of the unforgiven. The chamber beneath the chapel of blades was cloaked in ritual silence. Here, where no echo dared tread, the air itself was heavy with absolution and accusation. Statues of armored warriors stood in vigil, each carved with faces hidden behind helms, blank, eyeless, eternal. A circle of 13 chairs, each shaped in the Gothic style of old Caliban, surrounded a central brazier whose fire burned green with psychoactive oils. Only the highest of the Dark Angels, the inner circle, were permitted to enter this place. Here truth was spoken like a blade unsheathed. Here lies were lanced like poison. Azrael stood at the head of the circle, his expression a mask of composure. The words he carried were weapons, and the ones he spoke them to were not allies in the conventional sense. They were keepers of secrets, just like he was, and they had teeth. "Brothers," he began, his voice quiet, but heavy with a strain none could miss. "I bring word that may undo us." The silence that followed was broken only by the whisper of shifting robes and the rasp of breath through rebreathers. Veteran voices gathered here, company masters, chief librarians, interrogator chaplains. Each had stared into the abyss of the Legion's shame and continued to serve. It was Supreme Grand Master Samuel, heir to the 5th Company and warrior of fire-forged rage, who spoke first. His voice echoed against the chamber's stone ribs. "Is this another lead on the fallen?" "No," Azrael answered. "This is older than our hunt." Samuel narrowed his eyes. Older. Azrael stepped forward into the brazier's light, letting the flames dance against his battle-scarred armor. "The lion calls to us." That silenced them. Even Chief Librarian Eshrad, whose mind had been pierced by demons and who had studied the etheric scars of the heresy itself, paled. "You're certain?" asked Malak, stepping forward to reinforce his lord's claim. A signal bearing his seal. Psychic resonance matching archived echoes from Caliban's fall. Not a hoax, not a trick. From a place that predates even the Rangdan Wars, a slow, measured breath from Master Korahel. "He lives." "For now," Azrael said. "Or something bearing his imprint does. We cannot ignore it. But to chase ghosts," Samuel spat. "We have fallen to hunt, secrets to contain. If this is a lie..." "If it's a lie," Malak said grimly, "then the lie is perfectly constructed. And worse, it's spreading." He stepped toward the others, revealing the data slate he carried. The glow from its surface cast harsh light across the ritual chamber. 10 separate whispers in the warp, half-encoded transmissions intercepted near the maelstrom, ritual murders in the outer bastions, bodies posed in the old Legion heraldry, and 3 of our own. He paused. 3 of our own have gone silent after searching for truth. That drew murmurs, even among these iron men. Azrael let the moment linger before he struck. The lion is no longer legend. He is no longer myth. He has moved, and the galaxy itself reacts. If we do not act, then others will. Others who would use his name to destroy what little unity remains within the Imperium. "And if he remembers what we did?" asked Eshrad finally. A silence fell like a guillotine. Azrael met his gaze. "Then we answer for it." Samuel stood. Answer? After 10,000 years of silence, of purging the fallen in secret, of condemning brothers to oubliettes and confession chambers, you would bring all of it into the light for the sake of a signal. "I would face judgment," Azrael said, "and I would ask if we deserve mercy." A cold laugh from the shadows. It came from Seraphon, master of the watch and bearer of the 9th seal, his face half lit in the flame. "You forget what we are, what we have become. The First Legion no longer serves glory, we serve penance. The lion left us, whether by choice or madness. We were not deemed worthy to follow him. And if he returns, do you truly think he will bless our chains?" Malak turned sharply, voice rising. "He was our father, our liege. He chose us from among the stars. That burden does not end in silence. But perhaps," Seraphon said darkly, "it should have." Azrael's voice cut the air. "Enough." They quieted. "There is no longer time for caution. I will take a strike force to the coordinates. We go in silence, not as emissaries, not as pilgrims. as unforgiven. If he lives, we kneel. If he does not, then we bury what remains and ensure none weaponize his name. Corahale stood. And if what waits there is neither man nor corpse, if it is something else, then we deal with it, Azrael said. We are the first. We have no excuse to fear the past. The brazier's flame flared as warp resonance flickered across the chamber. Just a ripple, a reminder that even in their hidden fortress, they were being watched by something vast and unseen. Azrael nodded to Malak. Summon the watchers. Prepare the silencers. Only the chosen few must know. The inner circle began to disperse, shadows separating into deeper darkness. But one figure lingered. Seraphon. You walk into fire, Azrael, he said, his voice low and sharp. And not all of us will follow you out. Azrael turned, eyes unreadable. Then die in silence, brother. Or live with shame. But I will no longer hide behind a mask while the galaxy burns. Hours later, in the armory beneath the rock's spinal vaults, Chaplain Malak stood alone before a wall of relics. A sword, broken during the siege of Caliban. A fragment of blackened armor, once worn by a brother now hunted. A scroll, blood-stained and unfinished, written in the lion's own hand, its words smudged by time and sorrow. He touched none of them. Instead, he bowed his head, pressing his fingers against the old sigil carved into the stone floor. The mark of the original order, the knights of Caliban before they became angels. May we find redemption in fire, he whispered, or be judged justly by the flame. Behind him, a shadow passed silently. A watcher. It said nothing. It never did. But Malak felt the weight of its presence like gravity. Even now, he muttered, you follow him. The watcher tilted its head, as if in question. I wonder, Malak said, barely audible. Do you follow him to protect him, or to kill him if he remembers? There was no answer, only a flicker of warp light across the watcher's cowl, and then it was gone. Malak remained kneeling, the prayer on his lips forgotten. Outside, the engines of the rock stirred. The First Legion would move again, but not all of them for the same reason. The stars remember what we bury. The rock drifted through the void like a broken memory, its engines murmuring in low ritual tones, half machine, half prayer. Once Caliban's crust, now fortress monastery. It was a cathedral in mourning, a crypt carved through with war. From orbit, it resembled a floating tomb, and now it was opening its gates. Azrael stood in the observation deck of the Sword of Silence, the strike cruiser prepped for departure. Before him, the stars wheeled like watchful eyes. The coordinates whispered by the signal were etched into the ship's hololith, like an ancient wound reopened. Malak approached behind him. The chaplain walked like a man rehearsing his own death. She's ready, he said. The void engines are lit. Seraphon's company is withdrawn. We leave without them. Azrael didn't turn. I expected nothing more. Seraphon has always been bound more to what we were than what we must become. Malak hesitated. He says you chase ghosts. Perhaps I do, Azrael said, but even ghosts must be answered. A silence passed between them, long and unyielding. He fears, Malak said, what we all fear, that the lion will awaken with knowledge we cannot bury. Azrael's eyes glinted in the reflection of the void. Let him fear. Let us all fear. It is a feeling we've denied ourselves for too long. He turned, finally, to face Malak. There was a time I believed our secrecy protected the Imperium, that to speak of our shame would be to undo everything the lion bled for. But now, His voice trailed off. "You believe silence is our curse?" Malak asked. "I believe silence has become our faith," Azrael said. "And faith, when built on rot, becomes a coffin." The sword of silence broke away from the rock with no ceremony, only the dull thunder of engines tearing into the void. The crew was handpicked, veterans of the inner circle, battle brothers who had killed for secrets and died to preserve them. Among them were members of the Death Wing, armor painted bone white, silent as statues. Aboard, the atmosphere was thick, not with fear, but something heavier. Anticipation, perhaps. Dread worn like a cloak. Each brother knew what was at stake, and none dared voice it aloud. In his private sanctum, Azrael read the signal again. It wasn't a transmission in any conventional sense. No encryption, no language. It was a psychic echo, structured like a memory, an impression, not a message. But the signature was there, faint, ancient, but undeniable. The lion, and beneath it, a sensation he could not name. Grief, not his own, the lion's. He turned it over in his mind. Why would a being like the lion, so fierce, so imperious, leave behind an echo of grief? Unless he remembered. Unless something had returned. Malak stood before the sealed reliquary in the ship's vault. The object inside had not been touched in 1,000 years. Its containment wards pulsed softly with amber light, runes etched in the dialect of the Tower of Angels. Inside was a sword, or what remained of one, a calibanite weapon, forged before the Emperor walked the stars, broken in the last duel before the fall. It was said to have belonged to Zahariel, once a librarian of the First Legion, now one of the fallen. Malak had recovered it decades ago from a battlefield littered with whispers and bones. He had kept it secret even from Azrael, not for power, but because when he held it, he saw fragments, not visions, memories. Voices in his dreams spoke in Zahariel's tone. They did not ask for forgiveness. They asked if the wrong side had truly fallen. Tonight, as the ship slipped into the warp, he opened the reliquary. The sword's hilt pulsed gently in the warp light, as if reacting to their destination. He did not touch it, but he stared at it for a long time. They translated into real space 3 days later. The system was cold and dead. No stars lit the sky, only a collapsed singularity surrounded by asteroids. Ruins orbited like shattered altars, remnants of something once titanic. Black monoliths, structures that whispered necrontia but bore no glyphs. Others were stranger still. Vaults that twisted reality around them like glass submerged in oil. Nothing human had touched this place, and yet something calibanite had. The signal pulsed once more, stronger now. It led them toward the inner ring of debris, toward what appeared to be a floating fortress, half buried in a warped field of inertial distortion. It resembled a tower, but not Imperial, and not Necron. Azrael stood at the prow as the ship closed in, his eyes fixed on the structure. "It's not a tomb," he said. Malak stood beside him, whispering, "No, it's a prison." The strike team deployed via Thunderhawk, descending into a slow spiral, cautious of the distortions. As they approached the tower, visual interference danced across their auspex. The air, or what passed for it, was thick with ancient malice. They landed on a platform carved from obsidian, traced with glowing veins of unknown energy. The structure pulsed, alive but dormant, like a heart that had forgotten how to beat. Inside it was colder than the void. Walls rose around them like cathedral vaults, their heights lost in shadow. statues stood in alcoves, armored knights with blank faces and lion-headed crests. Symbols etched into the stone matched those recorded from pre-Imperial Caliban. "This place remembers him," Malak said, fingers brushing the walls. "No," Azrael whispered. "This place was him." They moved deeper. No resistance, no guardians, only silence, like the kind found in the moments before revelation. And then they found the chamber. It was not a throne room, not a sarcophagus. It was a cell. In the center stood a containment cradle of crystalline material, partially shattered. Inside a figure, not dead, not quite awake, armored in relic plate, marked by the sigils of the first, hair long and pale, face gaunt, pale, regal. The lion, his eyes opened. Azrael stepped forward, pulse thundering in his chest. He dropped to one knee. "My lord." The lion did not speak. He looked at Azrael, and then to Malak, and then past them. Not in confusion, but in sorrow. "I dreamed," he whispered. His voice was cracked, distant. "I dreamed of brothers burning. I dreamed of Caliban breaking. I dreamed you left me." Azrael bowed his head. "We never left. We spent 10,000 years atoning, hunting those who betrayed us." The lion looked at him. "Do you know who they were?" Azrael hesitated. "The fallen." The lion's eyes narrowed. "No," he said softly. "The ones who betrayed me are the ones who hunted their own." Malak froze. The air grew heavier. Something stirred deeper in the tower, something ancient. Azrael's heart sank. The lion remembered, and he was not grateful. The sword remembers the wound. The lion stood in silence. Even the distant engines of the Sword of Silence above seemed to hush in reverence or fear. Dust swirled around his boots as the ancient stasis field fully deactivated, its last arcs of suspended time flickering like dying stars. The void light played across his face, casting long shadows into the chamber. Eyes that had once surveyed the glories of Caliban now studied the warriors before him. Brothers by gene, strangers by soul. Azrael remained kneeling, head bowed, 1,000 years of penance pressed into that silence. Malak, beside him, was still as stone, though his fingers twitched involuntarily, his hand drawn subtly toward the relic blade at his side. The hilt of Zahariel's sword pulsed faintly, unnoticed by all but him. Finally, the lion spoke again. "I remember," he said. "I remember everything." The words were not triumphant. They were an accusation. Outside the tower, the Deathwing perimeter shifted uneasily. Some instinct, honed across 100 crusades and 10,000 battlefield engagements, told them the world beneath their feet was not dead, only dreaming, and what dreams it carried were not human. The ruins thrummed with power unrecognizable to Imperial sensors. Not warp, not Xenos tech, something older. And beneath that power, a resonance, a name. Luther. It echoed through Vox static, through the breathless hush in the tower, through the cracks in the lion's voice. "You hunted them," the lion said, voice low. "The fallen." "Yes," Azrael said, rising, "because they betrayed you." "They turned on Caliban, on the Imperium." "No," the lion interrupted. "They turned on me," he said, "because I turned on them first." Azrael faltered. "What are you saying?" "I was not what the Emperor made me to be," the lion whispered. "I ruled Caliban not as a son of mankind, but as a weapon fearing its own reflection. I destroyed what did not bend. I silenced what remembered freedom. He turned, slowly, toward the chamber wall, toward a relief carved into stone. A lion devouring serpents, beneath stars rendered as bleeding wounds. "I made my sons into judges," he said, "not brothers." Malak stepped forward, his voice thick. They rebelled. They gave themselves to the warp, some did, the lion replied, but not all, and we hunted them as if they were all the same. He paused. You built your faith on the bones of my guilt. There was no rage in his voice, only sorrow. Azrael felt the weight of his armor pressed down like a coffin. We did what was necessary, he said, quieter now. The lion turned back. His eyes were sharp now, clear, focused. You did what was easy. Above, the sword of silence detected a growing energy bloom. Deep within the tower, uncharted sublayers awakened. Power readings surged, then fragmented. Non-linear timelines, spatial, folding the auspex could not comprehend what it was detecting. In the vault below, lights flared, doors that had not opened since before the scouring shuddered, and from the dark beyond, a voice whispered. Zahariel. Malak gasped. He looked down. The sword was glowing. It pulsed like a heartbeat. The name echoed again, though this time through the minds of all present. Zahariel. Lion blood. Brother, the lion's eyes narrowed. That name should be dust, he said. Malak spoke, voice cracking. My lord, the blade. I recovered it from the ruins of Delvian 9. I didn't understand it, not fully, until now. He reached into his cloak, unwrapping the relic blade and holding it forth. The lion stepped closer. The sword vibrated faintly in his presence. When he touched it, the chamber responded. Walls shifted, sigils blazed. Hidden paths rearranged themselves like a puzzle given permission to breathe. The tower wasn't just a prison. It was a map, and it responded to lineage. They followed the shifting corridors downward. Each level descended not into stone, but into memory. They passed murals that depicted Caliban before the fall, forests untamed, knights dueling beneath green-gold skies, then scenes of the Great Crusade, the First Legion burning across the stars, bearing banners of absolute judgment. At the lowest levels, the murals changed. Knights turned on one another. The lion stood alone, sword raised as the earth cracked beneath him. The last mural was unfinished, just a figure in shadow, reaching for the lion's throat. Azrael stepped back. Malak turned to the lion. You knew this place. The lion's voice was quiet. I built it. Why? To contain what I feared most. And what was that? Azrael asked. The lion faced him. Myself. They reached the final chamber. Inside stood a sarcophagus, sealed with a blade embedded in the locking mechanism. Words of High Gothic and ancient Calibanite danced across its surface. Azrael stepped forward, reading them aloud. Let this be the last lie we bury, and the first truth we bleed for. The blade in the mechanism was familiar. The lion sword. The original, not the reforged relic borne by Azrael or other successors. The true weapon of the Primarch. It had been hidden here all along. Malak stared in awe. The lion reached forward and pulled the sword free. The sarcophagus hissed. Mist spilled across the floor. A shape inside shifted. A man, scarred, breathing, but bound in psionic manacles. Eyes opened, not green like the lion's, but gold, the colour of old promises. Luther, Azrael breathed. But the lion did not move. He only whispered one word. Brother. The chamber fell silent. Azrael's hand dropped to his bolt pistol. Malak did not move, but his knuckles went white around Zahariel's hilt. Luther looked from one face to the next. His voice, when it came, was calm. So, the end comes not with fire or absolution, he said, but with memory. The lion stepped forward, sword in hand. You remember what you did, he said. I remember what you did, Luther replied. The two men stared across time, across ruin. across all the lives broken between them. We have been liars too long, the lion said at last. I never stopped telling the truth, Luther said. No, the lion whispered. You just stopped caring if it was heard. The lion turned, not to Azrael, not to Malak, but to the shadows themselves. The chamber echoed with whispering laughter, the sound of something behind the walls, waking slowly. The tower had been built to contain the lion's guilt, but guilt draws predators. And now, something very old was watching. Malak whispered a prayer. Azrael raised his weapon. The lion raised his sword and pointed not at Luther, but at the darkness. This war is not over, he said. This war has just remembered us. The ones we chained below. The sword of silence hung in high orbit, cloaked in augur-dampening protocols older than the age of apostasy. From its vantage point above the nameless dead moon, it observed only stillness. No vox chatter, no enemy formations. Yet its crew felt it. Beneath the silence, something shifted, like gravity pressing sideways, like dreams souring just before waking. Captain Raphael of the Death Wing stood at the observation deck and whispered to no one. They woke him. Down below, the tower breathed. Beneath the surface, time had frayed. Azrael had known battle, had felt the heat of warp storms and the maddening shriek of demons. But this was different. This was a memory not his, one that didn't belong to any living man, yet clung to his mind like wet ash. The sarcophagus stood open. Luther sat on its edge, unbound now. His manacles had dissolved the moment the lion reclaimed his sword, as if the truth unspoken had been the only lock keeping him sealed. And the lion, he did not pace, did not shout. He stood in stillness, gazing at Luther the way one might gaze upon a painting of a man they once were, but could no longer recall. Azrael finally spoke. We've hunted the fallen for 10,000 years. In your name, for your honor. What are we to do now? The lion turned to him, gaze heavy with centuries. You hunted shadows and fed your warriors lies. You built a brotherhood on silence and shame. You did what I began. A pause. You did it better. Malak flinched. Then what do you ask of us? The lion's expression softened, not with mercy, but with age. I ask nothing. I only show you the wound. Luther coughed, a dry sound. The wound was never me, Azrael. It was us. Every choice we made when Caliban cried for truth, and we gave it fire instead. The name Caliban hung between them. Once a green jewel, now gone. Azrael stepped closer, his voice bitter. You tried to kill him. You tried to destroy the Tower of Angels. You made war on Terra's dream. No, Luther replied. I tried to destroy the lie. He turned his gaze to the lion. But I failed. Because in the end, I still loved you. There are truths that echo through walls. One such echo moved now, deep below, through passageways untouched since the fall. The Black Tower was never only a tomb. It was a crypt for more than one ghost. As the stasis chambers cycled open one by one, they stirred, fallen. Not those corrupted by chaos, not the ones turned mad by warped voices, but those who never turned, those who refused both sides. Zahariel's sword pulsed again in Malak's hand. He dropped to one knee, choking. Visions flooded him. Knights in white robes kneeling before a silver tree. The lion screaming as Caliban tore itself apart. Zahariel sealing doors not to escape, but to protect. A child buried alive with a book full of names. Malak gasped. The blade burned in his grip. Azrael reached out. Brother, Malak whispered. They're alive. Doors groaned open, Ancient air, stale with forgotten truths, spilled into the chamber. Stasis fields flickered as fail-safes failed. Within the hidden sanctum, a dozen armoured figures knelt in a circle, frozen in time. Their armour bore no insignia, no allegiance, just the mark of the First Legion, and at the centre, a throne of twisted wood and stone. Upon it, the corpse of a man long dead, or so they had believed, until now. His eyes opened. They called him Ezekiel, the First Voice, librarian archivist of Caliban before the fall. Thought slain in the bombardment, instead sealed by Zahariel in a psychic prison, made to last until the truth could be heard again. His voice cracked with rust as he spoke. You let the war become scripture. The lion stepped forward. Ezekiel. Ezekiel met his gaze. No longer a dream, are you, Lion L. Johnson? No longer the myth they used to chain their shame. Azrael stared in disbelief. What is this place? Luther spoke softly now. A last tribunal. A place for judgment, not against the traitors, but against the truth itself. The kneeling warriors stirred, stasis collapsing. One of them removed his helmet, grey at the temples, eyes hollow. Brother librarian, he said to Ezekiel, we held the memory. We did not speak, but now the wound calls again, Malak whispered. They're not fallen. They're unseen. Azrael stepped back, disoriented. What does that mean? Ezekiel rose from the throne. It means there was a third path. One denied by both vengeance and damnation, he pointed to the lion. And now your father has returned. Not to rule, but to confess. The lion lowered his sword. All these centuries, he said, I thought I was the wound that bled this legion dry. But I see now. He looked to Azrael. You made me holy, he turned to Luther. You made me monstrous, he turned to Ezekiel. And you made me honest. Silence fell, the kind of silence that precedes storms. Azrael whispered, Then what now? Ezekiel replied, Now we tell the truth, and we burn away all that was built to hide it. High above, aboard the Sword of Silence, comms blared, inquisitorial channels. An astropath screamed before falling silent. Sensors detected warp signatures, sharp, precise, and coming from inside the moon. A Deathwing sergeant paled. Sir, there are ships beneath the surface. The Inquisitor on deck, a pale woman named Verith Cal, narrowed her eyes. Impossible. That moon is dead rock. The deck shuddered. The stars dimmed. Verith whispered. Then what woke up? Beneath the tower, the lion looked up. The veil lifts. Luther turned to him. The Imperium won't accept this. Your sons won't follow you into fire. They won't have to, the lion replied. I will go alone. Azrael stepped forward, defiant. No, we follow. Whatever this becomes, we follow. Malak nodded, breathing hard. The sword remembers. Ezekiel raised one gauntleted hand. Then let the first truth be spoken. He turned to the kneeling warriors. Prepare the seals. Gather the memory vaults. The angel's shadow rises again. In orbit, engines lit across the void. Hidden fleets stirred. All across the galaxy, fallen and unseen alike felt it. The lion walked again, and this time, he did not walk as a savior. He walked as a reckoning. When the silence breaks, the stars above the dead moon of Caliban's echo no longer watched in silence. They shimmered as if bracing themselves. Warp tides pulsed unnaturally steady. Something in the void had shifted, too measured, too rhythmic, like a heartbeat long buried returning to life. The Sword of Silence hovered still, but her soul stirred. Deep in her machine choirs, The spirits of the ship howled warnings in binaric tongues. Scrivener priests reported systems misreading real space geometry. The world below refused to be seen by logic alone. On the observation deck, Inquisitor Verith Cal leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed at the unfolding blasphemy. He's awakening something that should have stayed dead. Her acolyte, trembling behind her, whispered, "Do we intervene?" She didn't answer. Her fingers traced the edge of her rosette, as if seeking approval from a god that no longer answered. Down below, beneath ancient stone and deeper secrets, the lion assembled those still willing to see. Luther walked through the lower vaults of the tower with the familiarity of a man returning to a wound that never healed. These were the chambers that Zahariel had built with psychic fire and soul steel, not to guard against demons, but against truth itself. The unseen gathered here. Once librarians, knights, philosophers, men who had refused to choose either lion or Luther in the sundering. They had fled instead, sealed themselves in stasis not from fear, but to outlive the lies. Azrael walked beside Luther, guarded but curious. "These were your followers?" Luther shook his head. "No, they were never mine. That's the point. They were the Legion's conscience, a thing neither I nor the lion could face." One of the unseen, a hooded figure with a voice like rust, turned toward them. "We have names," he rasped. Azrael paused. "Then give them. We deserve to know what we buried." The unseen removed his hood. His face was aged, worn, barely human, but his eyes were alive. "I am Urian Thorn, formerly epistolary of the 7th Company. I stood beside Zahariel when he sealed the first truth beneath Caliban. I watched the bombardment from within the vaults." Azrael blinked. "That would make you 11,000 years old," Urian nodded. "Give or take a lie." The lion entered then, silent as falling dust. His presence quieted the chamber more than any word. He spoke slowly, not with command, but with sorrow. "Too long have my sons fought shadows in my name. Too long have we bled to protect a lie that I myself helped carve." He faced Urian, then the unseen. "I am not here to destroy you. I am here to listen." Urian studied him. "You admit fault?" "I do more than admit it," the lion said. "I offer penance." And from his back, he removed the Sword of Secrets. Its blade flickered, black edge, golden runes, the ancient relic of the chapter master himself. He laid it at Urian's feet. "I broke the truth. You kept it. If I am to lead again, it will be with your judgment." Azrael gasped. "My lord, what are you doing?" The lion turned to him, calm and cold. "I am undoing the sin of legacy. This legion will not survive if it continues to feed on denial." Luther spoke then, with a voice heavier than before. "If you do this, if you embrace the unseen, you will fracture the unforgiven. They will never accept the fallen." The lion's reply was simple. "Then let them fall." On the upper levels, the tower trembled. It was not seismic activity, it was activation. Zahariel's failsafe protocols were waking. The vaults were unlocking. The memory engines, machines older than the Imperium, built from Calibanite psychic constructs and forgotten human science, began to speak, not with words, but with visions. Malak collapsed. His sword shrieked in resonance. He saw the Primarchs, not as statues but as boys, fractured, lost, broken before they were heroes. The Emperor's face, not glowing gold, but hollow-eyed, forging unity from desperation. Zahariel and Luther arguing in the ruins of Alderuk, not about betrayal, but about truth suppression protocols. A council of proto-inquisitors approving the sealing of the truth for the greater good. And then a Vision of Azrael, not as he was, but as he had once been, standing before a shattered Luther, choosing to continue the lie, choosing to let others hunt for sins never committed. Malak cried out. Azrael looked down at him, shaken. What did you see? Malak's whisper was barely audible. The truth is not betrayal. The truth is choice. We never had one above. Verith Kal had made her decision. She opened Vox channels to the Grey Tithe, a nearby Ordo Hereticus vessel. Proceed with Exterminatus Protocol Theta Prime. Her acolyte gasped. There are loyalists down there. Not if they side with that. The order was given. The cyclonic torpedoes launched. The stars flared. In the tower, the lion turned his head sharply. They're coming. Luther smiled, bitter. Some truths must be burned to be reborn. Ezekiel stepped forward, lifting his ancient Crozius. Then we bear them into fire. Azrael looked up, the weight finally cracking his voice. Give the order, my lord. For once, let us choose. The lion drew his second blade, not the sword of secrets, but the one Caliban itself had forged for him, the blade of midnight silence. I give no orders, he said, only truth. The unseen knelt before him. The fallen followed. Azrael stepped forward and bent the knee. Malak followed. A new circle was formed, one not bound by legacy, but by confession. And beneath them, the vaults opened wide. The true history of the First Legion burned into memory plate and psychic stone. The world would know, if it survived. The torpedoes fell. The Tower of Silence lit up with golden shields. Psychic resonances echoed from the vault. The memory engine sang, a last act of defiance. From within the heart of the fortress, warp light erupted. A beacon, a scream, a confession. And every fallen, every unforgiven across the galaxy heard it. The truth had been spoken, and it could never be silenced again. The flame and the bell. The bells of terror rang once more, not in celebration, but in warning. In the deep, buried sanctums of the Inquisition, within the obsidian depths of the conclave Astropathica, messages from the edges of the Imperium arrived burned and corrupted, not by the warp, but by something more insidious, memory restored. A signal, psychic and impossibly old, pulsed outward from Caliban's echo. It was not a call for help. It was an invitation to judgment. The Grand Masters of the Unforgiven watched in silence as the pulse reached their worlds. One by one, each fortress monastery received the vision, a tower of light breaking the surface of a black moon, crowned with burning wings and bleeding truths. The lion stood within it, and with him, Luther, the fallen, worse still, Azrael. On the world of deliverance, Chapter Master Bether of the Angels of Redemption broke the viewing lens with his armored fist. Madness. He kneels beside traitors. No, muttered Chaplain Maleris, who stared longer. He kneels beside the truth. On the rock, what remained of the ancient Calibanite moon now drifted in mourning silence. No message had come, no command from Azrael, no word from the lion. The watchers in the dark, once whispering riddles and fate, now gathered in wide circles of silence. Their eyes watched the stars. Their mouths did not move. Ezekiel stood upon the summit of the Aegis Tower, robes still charred from the psychic surge of the vaults. He could feel it, every soul in the chapter shivering with something they had never known. Doubt. The truth, he whispered, has formed now. Not legend, not whispers. He turned to Samael, who stood beside a gleaming bike not yet ridden. We must choose, old friend. Samael's face was hard with fury. Choose. The lion sides with Luther. You'd call that truth. He chooses to heal, Ezekiel answered. You choose to obey. They stared at one another, the silence between them now deeper than the warp. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the grey tide, Inquisitor Verith Cal sat in stillness. The torpedoes had struck. The surface of Caliban's echo was a sea of fire and psychic discharge. But no confirmation of death had come. She watched the burning moon through the augmented glass, and for the first time in her service to the Ordo Hereticus, she hesitated. What have you awakened, Lion? She asked the void. What gives you the right to speak truth without sanction? Her hands hovered over the console, her next order pending. Full exterminatus. No survivors, no questions. But her psychic hood tingled. And then she heard it. A voice, not human, not demonic, older. It was the echo of Zahariel. Truth burns. It does not kill. It reveals what you were always becoming, Cal reeled. She turned to her astropath, who now bled from the eyes. They are not dying, he rasped. They are resurrecting. Beneath the scorched skin of Caliban's echo, the lion stood unburnt. The Tower of Silence was wounded but intact. Azrael and the Unseen stood beside him, encased in a dome of refracted memory light. The torpedoes had failed to kill what was already myth. Luther knelt beside the shattered altar of truth, holding a burning relic in his hands, a shard of the original tenets of the First Legion. It shimmered in his palms, alight with psychic fire. They tried to erase us, he muttered. The lion did not reply. Azrael turned to him. You knew they would come. I did, the lion said, and you let them. I needed to know who would stand. He faced the surviving unforgiven, eyes bright with fury and sorrow. This was never a war of swords. It was a war of memory, of choice Malak, still shaking from the visions, stepped forward. You gave us the truth. But it is tearing us apart. The lion placed his hand on the boy's pauldron. Then we must forge something new. Ezekiel, watching from the side, turned toward the open vaults. The data stales, he said softly. They speak not only of betrayal. They speak of what came before, of how the Emperor chose which truths to shape and which to bury. Zahariel's voice returned, a final echo through the vaults. Truth, my brothers, is a weapon. Wield it gently, or wield it utterly. In orbit, a second fleet approached. Signals from successor chapters. Dark Angel splinter factions, watchmasters of the Deathwing, even rogue knight brotherhoods from the days of the heresy. They came not to wage war, but to demand answers. Some knelt, others aimed weapons. But the lion did not raise his blade. He raised his voice. I do not ask your loyalty. I do not ask your forgiveness. I ask you to see, not what we were told, not what we feared, but what we are. He pointed to the open vaults. Our legacy was built on the silence of broken oaths. But if we are to survive the coming darkness, the real threat beyond the stars, we must be whole. He let the silence hang. And then, like the first note of a hymn not sung since the Great Crusade, one ship powered down weapons, then another, and another. Samael, watching from orbit, closed his eyes and sent the signal, stand down, await further revelation. On Terra, in a crypt beneath the Imperial Palace, a man in black watched from a forbidden data-scrying node. He was not Inquisitor, not Astartes, not one of the High Lords. He was older. His name had been struck from memory. But as he watched the fires around Caliban's echo shift from destruction into something far more dangerous, reform, he whispered to himself. So, the lion finally speaks. He turned to a hidden vox. Activate Protocol Umbral. Inform the Fabricator General. The age of apostasy may need revision. In the depths of warp space, something stirred. It had once worn feathers of fire and a crown of impossible paradox. It remembered the lion. It had whispered in Zahariel's dreams. And now, as truth broke open a wound in the galaxy, it watched with something close to admiration. A shame, the demon mused. When mortals tell the truth, even we begin to falter. The lion stood at the edge of the ruined vault, surrounded by his legion, not one of faith or heresy, but of truth. The truth is not our enemy, he said, but neither is it our shield. It is our burden. And he turned toward the stars, toward the next world that needed to remember. Of oaths and ashes, the outer moons of Zephyr's reach had long been forgotten by the Imperium, left to decay in quiet orbits, their stone halls turned to dust and their machine prayers to static. But now, in the cold shadow of truth awakened, these ruins whispered once more. The lion stood in the shade of a shattered cathedral keep, its ancient arches pierced by starlight. He had come here alone, save for the unseen, who followed him always, silent and invisible, as if memories with form. His footfalls echoed on dust that had not been disturbed in 10 millennia. This was where he had sworn his second oath, not to the Emperor, not to humanity, but to Luther. He had failed them both. I remember, he murmured. I remember what I chose to forget. From behind him, the gentle whir of ancient servos stirred. A figure approached, a shape he had not seen in this place since the heresy. Cloaked in parchment and grief, bearing the scarlet seal of repentance, stood Brother Archivist Meros, one of the last of the original order. You should not have come alone, Meros said, his voice hoarse with age and regret. There are still those who would see you silenced, by any means. I am never alone, the lion replied, nodding to the shadows. They have always followed me. Meros inclined his head toward the ruined altar. Then you know what lies beneath. I do. But I must face it with open eyes. No more lies. Beneath the altar, sealed in stasis amber, was a relic once thought heretical. A broken seal of the First Calibanite Council. It was older than the Imperium, older perhaps than even the warp-gifted scholars knew. Upon it was a single word, Veritas. It pulsed now, faintly. It speaks again, Meros whispered. After all these centuries, the seal speaks. Because truth has been spoken aloud, the lion replied, and now truth answers. In orbit above Zephyr's reach, a ship shaped like a spear drifted closer. The Iron Talon, flagship of the Consecrators. Chapter Master Seraphon stared at the planetary readouts with growing unease. He was not a man moved by visions or prophecy. He had sworn fealty not to men, but to legacy, to order. But this fracture within the unforgiven was not just schism, it was evolution. His vox hissed. A transmission played, from Caliban's echo, Azrael's voice, calm and unbroken. There can be no redemption without remembrance. The First Legion must return to what it was, before the silence. Before the lie, Seraphon closed the vox. Prepare the conclave. Elsewhere, on a world near the Eye of Terror, where fallen still gathered like shadows around a dying flame, Tifalon the Black, once a librarian of the First, watched the visions unfold through a cursed warp vein. He had abandoned repentance long ago, but the lion's words reached even him. They seek unity, he hissed to the others. They speak of absolution. But absolution comes not through peace, it comes through fire. The fallen stirred. Many had waited for this moment, not to return, but to be acknowledged. Their exile was never only punishment, it was concealment. If they want us remembered, Tiflon growled, then let them remember everything. He lifted the ancient sigil of the First Legion, blackened and broken, and let them bleed for it. Back on Zepheth's reach, the lion placed his palm upon the amber-locked relic. The seal cracked. A psychic scream tore through the stars, wordless but clear. Every scion of the First Legion heard it, from the deepest crypt vaults of the Angels of Absolution to the hidden monasteries of the Disciples of Caliban. They heard the truth, unfiltered, raw. The First Legion had been built upon duality, not light and darkness, but memory and denial. And now the gate between them had been flung open. Azrael stood in the Tower of Silence, eyes closed. He felt the scream more than heard it. He fell to one knee, not in pain, but in release. So long had he carried the weight of silence. So long had he shielded his warriors from the rot of their legacy, believing it was mercy. But now the silence had cracked, and the void behind it was not death, but awakening. He stood. Let them come. Beside him, Ezekiel stepped forward, his staff aglow. Even those who hate you, especially them. On Terra, again the hidden man, known to some as the Sigillite's last shadow, watched the echo spread. Reports flowed in of dark angels breaking silence, fallen emerging from ancient hiding, whole chapters refusing further commands from the High Lords. He leaned forward, pale eyes gleaming. It begins. Not rebellion, not treachery, but something worse. He spoke a word that only the oldest of Terran libraries still remembered. Reckoning. That night, as stars wheeled above the cracked halls of Zepheth's Reach, the lion lit a fire upon the broken altar. Around him stood 12 figures, some known, some hidden, some fallen. They said no words. They watched the fire. And then, slowly, one by one, each stepped forward and cast a relic of silence into the flames, a sealed confession, a chapter's censored history, a broken sword once turned on a brother. When the fire reached its peak, the lion raised his eyes. This is not forgiveness. This is remembrance, and from remembrance we build anew. The turning of the blade. The stars above Caliban's echo were unusually still, as though the void itself held its breath. In orbit, warships of the unforgiven circled like carrion beasts awaiting command, not in battle readiness, but in doubt. The signal from Zepheth's Reach had not merely cracked the veil of secrecy, it had shattered the sacred rhythm of the first. What had once been loyalty was now division. Some knelt at the altar of memory. Others held tighter to silence, fearing what would follow if the whole truth bled through. Deep within the librarious vaults of the rock, Chief Librarian Ezekiel meditated. Voices no longer whispered to him in half-dreams. They screamed now, names, moments, places long erased from Imperial record. The fallen were not myths. They had been brothers. And some still lived. Ezekiel. The voice came from the doorway. Azrael. The Grand Master entered slowly, helm tucked under his arm. He looked wearier than the librarian had ever seen him, not weak, but bared. The mask of certainty no longer shielded him. I will convene the conclave, Azrael said, not in secrecy, not in penance, but in judgment. Ezekiel opened his eyes. Judgment of whom? Azrael did not answer. Not yet. On the desolate world of Mordril 6, where the rock had once been hidden, the Order of the Broken Wing, the oldest detachment of the Dark Angels still clinging to their original Calibanite doctrine, received the signal. It was not merely data, it was invocation. Captain Morthal read the encoded transmission beneath the firelight of his chapter's fortress. His armor bore the original livery of the First Legion, half bleached ivory, half midnight green, no chapter markings, just the sword of old. When his second-in-command approached, he did not look up. "It's begun," Morthal said. "They're calling it a reckoning." "No, not a reckoning." Morthal looked toward the skies. "A choosing." He gestured toward the ancient vault beneath the chapel, sealed for over 10,000 years. "Wake the primogenitors." "Sir, they are half mad, barely." "Wake them. The Dark Angels will be whole, or they will fall apart." In the eye of terror, Tiflon gathered the fallen. Their number had dwindled over the millennia. Betrayal, demons, time itself had claimed many. But those who remained were the unbroken. Not saints, not victims, but survivors. "The lion has returned," Tiflon spat. "He would make peace. Speak of remembrance, as if he has the right." The others stood silent. These were not soldiers anymore. They were ghosts, chained to the lie of treachery they never accepted, but some still believed. "He has changed," said one, a woman in scorched emerald armor, bearing the broken wing of Caliban on her pauldron. "He walks among the living. He lit the flame of truth. He will use that truth to cleanse us," Tiflon growled, "and then erase us." She stepped forward. "Or he will welcome us back." Tiflon laughed. "Welcome us back to what? A broken brotherhood? A throne of rust and guilt?" Silence followed. It was not agreement, but it was fracture. Even among the fallen, the choosing had begun. Back on Caliban's echo, the lion stared into the dark mirror of the warp, a thing the Imperium forbade, but which he no longer feared. He saw worlds burning, not from Xenos or chaos, but from themselves. He saw brother against brother, chapters torn by ideology, not loyalty. He saw Azrael at war with his own conscience, Tiflon standing before terror with a legion of ghosts, and he saw himself standing on a field of ash, a blade in each hand. Neither struck, because there was no enemy left to kill, only the truth. The conclave convened within the Chamber of Blades, once the War Council of Lion L. Johnson himself. Azrael, Ezekiel, Interrogator, Chaplain Luthern, and 20 Masters of the Unforgiven gathered, from the Angels of Vengeance, from the Consecrators, from the Guardians of the Covenant. Even the Angels of Redemption had sent an envoy. 12 spoke in favor of silence. 10 favored disclosure. Azrael stood last. "I have borne the burden of secrecy all my life," he said. "I believed it was protection. A shield against madness, heresy, truth. But what is protection if it strangles the soul of our legion?" He turned to the others. "We are no longer warriors. We are inquisitors of our own past, and our sons do not know what they fight for." Lucerne snarled. "They fight for atonement." "Then tell them for what sin," Azrael snapped. "Tell them what we truly did. Or let us cease to exist and let others carry on the lie." The chamber fell still. Then Ezekiel stepped forward. "The warp has spoken. Not with demonic madness, with memory. It no longer lies dormant. The truth is rising. Whether we speak it or not, one by one, the Masters looked to Azrael, and with grim finality, the vote was cast. The Dark Angels would no longer hunt the fallen in silence. They would call them home and prepare for what followed. But not all agreed. Within the rock, beneath its deepest sanctum, a splinter faction began to gather. Interrogator chaplains who had built their lives on the sanctity of the lie. Veterans who had lost brothers to the fallen. Loyalists who believed the lion had changed too much. They took no banners, no oaths, only a name, the covenant inviolate. And in darkness, they readied themselves, not for truth, but for purity. Ghosts of Caliban. The rock drifted through the void like a cathedral of war lost in thought. Its cyclopean hull bore the scars of millennia. Impact craters from black crusades, scorch marks from demon fire, and yet deeper, older wounds from before the fall. Within its halls, the silence was different now. Not sacred, not grim, but watchful, as if the fortress monastery itself had turned inward, waiting for a decision its lords were not yet prepared to make. Azrael stood alone in the grand archive, gazing into the stasis field, where the last fragment of Caliban's crust, unchanged since the world tore itself apart, hovered in amber stasis. He no longer felt reverence, only doubt. Was the rock a relic or a gravestone? Ezekiel entered, slow and deliberate, his robes whispering against stone like waves on a distant shore. The librarian no longer sought omens. He felt them now, woven into every step. It's spreading, Ezekiel said. Azrael didn't look away. I know. Several chapters refused to acknowledge the vote. The angels penitent, the keepers of the flame. Even the Iron Guard question your right to convene the conclave. They question. Everything now Azrael's voice held no anger, only exhaustion. And they're right to. Silence hung between them. Then Ezekiel spoke, his voice lower. He's calling them. Azrael turned at last. The fallen? The librarian nodded. Not to hunt, not to judge, but to listen. The lion is speaking with them. Azrael's jaw clenched. We swore they were traitors. We told ourselves they were. The fallen came in ones and twos, not in armadas, not under banners, but like shades slipping through the seams of reality, on foot, by warp-racked shuttle, through secret astropathic codes lost since the scouring. And they did not come to kneel. They came to be seen. One bore the face of a brother lost 10,000 years before, a pale, unspeaking warrior known only as Cassian, whose eyes held neither rage nor repentance. Another, former chaplain Bellorath, carried a relic blade that once belonged to Luther himself. They came not to rejoin. They came to ask, why had they been forsaken? And in the gardens of the rock, hidden beneath its weapon decks and libraries of sin, the lion met them, not as a god nor as a lord, but as a penitent father. There were no sermons, no promises, just the words, you were not forgotten, only hidden, and now the light returns. But not all light heals. Far from the rock, on the cold world of Karax, the angels of absolution uncovered a cache, sealed during the heresy, buried in the tectonic shelf beneath an abandoned cathedral. Inside were Vox recordings, corrupted memory scrolls, and a data slate encoded in cipher, once used by Luther's inner circle. One phrase repeated over and over in Low Gothic, the lion knew. When word reached Azrael, the tremor ran deep. If true, it would mean the first Primarch had not been betrayed. He had allowed it. Within the newly formed covenant inviolate, war councils stirred. Hidden chambers beneath the tertiary vaults of the rock flickered with candlelight and static-ridden sigils. These were not traitors. They were purists. To them, the lion's outreach was heresy, cloaked in forgiveness. The fallen were unclean, unworthy, a disease threatening the purity of the Legion's soul. Interrogator Chaplain Marnak, once thought lost in the Maelstrom Wars, now stood at their head. "They speak of truth," Marnak said to his inner circle, "but it is mercy in disguise. Mercy weakens. It unmakes." He lifted the flayed mask of a heretic from a ritual slab. "If the lion will not protect us from corruption, then we must protect him." The Covenant's goal was not rebellion, it was correction. In the warp, Tiflon dreamed. He saw Azrael dead, sword run through by a brother's hand. He saw the rock burning. He saw the lion, alone once again, staring across a battlefield of loyal corpses. And he smiled, because the enemy was never chaos, it was remembrance. Back aboard the rock, the lion gathered the fallen who had come. They stood in the Hall of Echoes, where no voice rose louder than a whisper, and where every word spoken remained imprinted on the stone. "This place," the lion began, "was once sanctuary. Now it is scarred by silence." Cassian, the silent one, stepped forward. "We did not fall by choice," he said. His voice was dry, sand scraped across rusted steel. "We followed orders, defended what we believed to be right. And when you returned," another added, "we were your shame." The lion bowed his head. "I was not there when you were branded. I did not speak when you were hunted. I did not question the tale they told in my absence." He looked up, eyes gleaming with a strange, sorrowful clarity. "But I am here now." Behind them, the doors of the hall groaned open. Azrael stood on the threshold. His gaze met the lion's, and though neither moved nor spoke, the meaning passed like fire between them. "It is time." On Mordril 6, the Broken Wing activated the ancient beacon at the chapel's summit. An astropathic burst rippled across the void, a message not in code nor call to arms, just one word: unify. But even as this new vision spread, the Covenant in Violet made their first strike. In the silent dark between the rock and the rest of the Unforgiven fleet, they hijacked a boarding vessel. They did not attack. They did not claim ground. They simply extracted a prisoner from the deepest cells. An old man, skin translucent, voice long since gone, mind broken by endless interrogation. A fallen who knew Luther's final words before his disappearance. They took him into the dark and prepared to rewrite the truth. The silence between the oaths. There was no warning, no formal declaration, no glorious clash of honor-bound brotherhoods, only absence, the kind that echoes, the kind that devours. The prisoner was gone, no breach recorded, no alarm sounded. The sanctum seals remained unbroken. Azrael stared at the readout for a long, quiet moment, his reflection flickering in the data slate like a fading flame. "This can't be coincidence," said Master Samael. "Not after the beacon. Not after the fallen gathered under the lion's gaze." Azrael said nothing. He had long known there were factions among the Unforgiven that disagreed. But this theft was not dissent. It was a statement. They had taken the last living witness to Luther's final hours, a soul buried beneath psychic decay and memory scars. Not for vengeance, not to kill, to use. Far from the rock, aboard a derelict cathedral ship once used by the Angels of Vigilance, the Covenant in Violet prepared their revelation. In a vaulted chapel where statues of Calibanite saints lay shattered at their feet, Marnak stood over the prisoner. The man's name had been erased. He no longer remembered it. He spoke in broken phrases, feverish, visions, and cryptic mutterings. But in the darkness, beneath layers of psychic trauma, was a thread, Marnak, with the help of blasphemous tech recovered from the Dark Mechanicum, data extraction helms once used to tear truths from the minds of heretics, reached into the prisoner's soul. They did not seek confession. They sought confirmation, and it came. "I saw him," the old man whispered, drool trailing down his chin. "The lion." He stood with Luther. At the end, he knew. He saw the war split open and let it happen. For Caliban, for penance. We were the price acolytes, recorded every word, sealed them in crypt echo chambers, reinforced with black steel wards. The message would spread, carefully, strategically, a truth, half-rotted and bleeding, weaponized for purity. On the rock, Azrael called a rare gathering, not of all the unforgiven, only the inner circle, Samael, Ezekiel, Belial, the chapter masters of the Angels of Redemption and the consecrators, all those who had borne the weight of secrecy for millennia, and now felt it slip from their hands. "This ends now," Azrael said, voice low. Ezekiel looked at him, calm as ever. "You mean to confront them?" "No," Azrael said. "I mean to choose." There were no gasps, no objections, only the quiet shift of power in the air, like the moment before the storm breaks. "I have hidden truths from all of you," Azrael continued, "not out of malice, out of necessity, for the chapter, for its honor. But the lion has returned, and with him the past refuses to stay buried." He paused, drawing the sword of secrets from his back and planting it in the stone floor. "I no longer believe we can serve both the lie and the legion." The others said nothing, because in their hearts they already knew. Ezekiel stepped forward when the council ended, staying behind as the others departed. "You don't trust him," he said simply. Azrael didn't answer right away. He looked at the ancient blade, a relic from Caliban, forged by hands long dead. "Do you?" "I trust he returned when we needed him most," Ezekiel said. "But I also remember that his silence once cost us our homeworld." Azrael nodded. "Then we are both cursed with memory." The lion sat in quiet reflection in a chamber rebuilt from Calibanite stone, an effort by the fallen themselves. He could feel the cracks in the air, the judgment of ghosts. He did not call the others. He waited. And soon, Cassian entered. His armor bore no sigils, no honor marks, just matte black ceramite and the silent weight of history. The Inviolate have begun to spread the prisoner's message. The lion's gaze did not shift. "So be it." Cassian frowned. "You are letting them rewrite you." "No," the lion whispered. "I am letting the past finish its sentence." He stood, tall as a statue, eyes unfocused. "Not lost, but seeing something beyond I held back once," he said. "Tried to preserve something broken, hide it behind penance. But that wound festered. It poisoned my sons. My home." Cassian looked down. "And now I will not shield them from the truth. If they burn me for it, so be it." Cassian hesitated. "Some of them are considering it." The rock shifted course. Azrael had ordered it to break orbit. It now traveled toward the last known coordinates of the Inviolate fleet cell. The mission was not war. It was reckoning. Yet as they traveled, more rumors bloomed across the unforgiven, of chapters splintering, of old interrogators vanishing, of the angels penitent refusing all contact. Even within the rock, line officers whispered that the old ways had ended. It was a legion again, but not a brotherhood, a crucible. And across the galaxy, whispers moved through the warp like a tide. Something ancient was watching. Not the Chaos Gods, but something older, unnamed, feeding not on sin, but on contradiction. They gathered near the edges of time, where memory blurred and regret had weight. The warp loved secrets, and the dark angels were full of them. Tiflon sat upon the rusted throne of his forge planet, where machines screamed prayers to entropy. He felt the storm gather around the rock and smiled. He no longer needed to strike. He merely needed to wait, for the lion's sons would tear themselves apart, just as they had the first time. The breaking of the Oathbound. The rock arrived at the edge of the Adramant cluster, a dead space lit only by a dim neutron star and the shattered remains of once hallowed worlds. Here, the Covenant Inviolate had made their stand, not in open defiance, but in solemn conviction. They waited. No fleet formation, no weapons locked, just a dozen ancient battle barges, motionless, their banners stripped and their colours faded. Ships that had once borne angels of vengeance now hung like relics adrift in the void. Azrael stood before the tactical hololith, his gauntlet trembling faintly. "They're not preparing for war," said Samael, scanning the enemy formations. "They're inviting judgment." "No," murmured Azrael. "They're delivering it." Ezekiel turned from the screen. "They want us to strike first." "To validate the accusation, Azrael echoed bitterly, "that we are no longer sons of the lion, but jailers of the truth." Silence followed. Not denial, not outrage, just the hollow throb of realization. Aboard the Covenant Inviolate's flagship, the Dread of Caliban, Marnak stood in the Sanctum Chapel with the ancient prisoner seated beneath a psychometric halo. Wires fed his thoughts into a pulsing engine of dark glass and iron. His mind, now fragmented, projected across voxnets in symbols and whispers. "His voice will be heard in every system the unforgiven call holy," Marnak said. "And then?" asked his second, a former interrogator chaplain named Baraxis, his face covered in cipher scars. "Then we'll see who they really serve. The truth, or the idea of the truth." The lion awoke in silence. He had been dreaming again, not of battle, not of Caliban, of himself, a face lost to history before the name Primarch had meaning, before honor became ritual, before oaths became burdens. He stood and donned his armor in silence. Azrael was waiting. "My lord," the Supreme Grandmaster said, bowing his head in instinct more than reverence. The lion studied him. "The chapter is divided." "Yes. And you?" "I am loyal to the chapter," Azrael answered carefully. The lion walked past him. "That is not what I asked." Azrael said nothing. Outside the chamber, Samael and Ezekiel watched the exchange unfold from behind sealed adamantine doors. The echoes that escaped were soft, measured, no shouting, no oaths. But what emerged from that room would change the chapter forever. The rock moved forward. Azrael's orders were clear. Do not fire unless fired upon. Maintain Vox silence. And above all, no blood spilled among kin. But it was too late for that. In the deepest chambers of the rock, dissent had already bloomed. A detachment of interrogators had vanished, taking with them forbidden relics, black data scrolls, and caged memories from Caliban's last night. Ezekiel, in meditation, sensed the fracture. He saw it not as a battle, but as a shattering, like glass under pressure. When he opened his eyes, his vision bled. "We are too late," he whispered. In orbit, the Dread of Caliban broadcast. No threats, no demands, only a voice. Not the prisoner's, but a synthesis of his mind, fed through an algorithmic choir of psionic resonance. It spoke not to the ears, but the conscience. We were brothers, we were warriors, we were damned. And the lion knew a pause. Truth does not absolve. It binds. You hid it. You buried it. And now you ask, for what purpose? The word spread, carried across astropathic channels, through the warp, through memory, and with it came visions, smeared impressions of that final day on Caliban, of Luther, of the lion standing above his broken brother, not striking the final blow, but walking away, choosing silence. Azrael stood in the chapel of judgment, alone. He looked up at the mosaics carved in obsidian and stained with the blood of martyrs. They told a story, a glorious lie, one he had upheld with fervour. And now he saw only cost. He remembered his youth, the hunger for answers, the certainty, the faith in the lion's purpose. But now that the lion had returned, that certainty had not returned with him, only doubt. The lion stood at the observation deck watching the fleet ahead. "Do you hate them?" asked Cassian, stepping beside him. "No," the lion said. "They are what I made them. What I allowed them to become." Cassian waited. The lion turned slowly. "You want to know if I'll order their deaths?" Cassian nodded. "I won't," said the lion, "but I will not stop what must happen." On the rock's lowest deck, a detachment of consecrators broke formation and stormed the reliquary vaults. They seized ancient data crypts and pre-heresy vox logs sealed by Luther himself. They wore no chapter markings, only the black of mourning. Ezekiel met them in silence, blade drawn. The fight lasted 13 seconds. He sheathed his sword, kneeling beside the last of them. "What truths are worth killing for?" he asked, not expecting an answer. But the dying warrior smiled. "The ones you don't want to hear." On the bridge, Azrael watched the fleet grow closer. The moment was near. He keyed a vox channel. "All unforgiven vessels, stand by." He stared at the screen, and then turned it off. "Let them speak," he said. A pause. Samael stepped forward. "What?" "No weapons, no fleets. We board them. We speak. If we are warriors of truth, then we face it. No more hiding." He turned to them. "If the lion won't end this, we must." As the boarding pods descended into the dark cathedral ships, something in the warp stirred. A ripple, a hunger, not chaos, not malice, but witness. The old ones had names for it. It watched, not with hate, but with anticipation. It had waited since Caliban's fall, since oaths were first broken in secret. Now, with the unforgiven poised to tear out their shame and show it to the stars, it leaned closer and smiled. The conclave of ash and memory. The boarding craft did not meet resistance. No gunfire, no interceptors. Only the eerie quiet of ancient ships once clad in honor, now stripped to bone and rust, drifting in the void like tombs. Azrael stepped onto the flagship of the Covenant in violet, flanked by Samael and Ezekiel. Behind them, warriors of the unforgiven moved in silence, not as conquerors, but as men walking into the graves of brothers they had once bled beside. No lights, no banners, only torches lining the halls, casting long shadows on murals of the lion, of Luther, of a Caliban that never existed. The dread of Caliban was a mausoleum of what they had buried. Azrael's vox pinged once, then again. "No signals," said Samael, "but they're watching us." "The whole ship feels awake." Ezekiel nodded, eyes closed. "Not just the ship. The past is bleeding through." They followed the corridor deeper. Statues lined the walls, weathered, broken. Not of primarchs or saints, but of the fallen, each with a name etched in low calibanite. Azrael paused at one. Mekir Aton, defender of Elthrin Vale. He had interrogated Mekir once, broken him, extracted his secrets until the man wept for forgiveness and died in silence. Yet here he stood as a hero. I remember this name, Azrael whispered. They all remember us, Ezekiel replied. At the sanctum they were met not with weapons but words. Baraxes stood at the archway, flanked by warriors clad in burnished black and green, the colour of Caliban before the fall. We speak or we die, Baraxes said. No, Azrael replied. We speak because we are dying. They entered. The chamber was circular. At its centre stood Marnak, cloaked in shadow. Beside him, wired to a stasis helm, was the prisoner, still alive, still lucid, his mind a chorus of memories bound in machines older than the Imperium. Marnak's voice was hollow when he spoke. You came here not for peace, nor for war, but to see if your silence still holds meaning. Azrael stepped forward. I came to see if I still deserve to wear this armor. A long silence followed, and then Marnak gestured. The stasis helm deactivated with a low chime. The prisoner's eyes opened. They were blind, but he saw them. Azrael, he rasped. You've aged. Azrael took a breath. You remember me. I remember all of you. Because I loved you. I still do. That is why I chose silence then, and why I must speak now. Samael's hand went to his sword, instinctively. Ezekiel held him back. You were there, the prisoner whispered, at the last conclave. When Luther tried to end the war with truth, and the lion chose exile instead of justice. Azrael's voice cracked. You don't know what he bore. What we bore, but I do, said the prisoner. The hololith at the centre of the chamber activated. It showed Caliban as it once was. Forests thick as cathedrals, skies as green as jade, then flame, collapse, orbiting debris, and then the moment, the last moment, the lion standing over Luther, not with wrath, but with sorrow, dropping his blade, walking away. He could have killed him, the prisoner said, but he did not, and neither did you. You buried him. Along with every truth that shamed you, Azrael knelt. I buried him because I believed in the chapter, in unity, in the idea that secrets protected us, and now, Marnak asked. Azrael rose. Now I believe that secrets destroyed us. A low thrum echoed through the ship, not from weapons, but from the warp. Far above, in the Imperium's edge, the thing that watched the sons of the lion began to stir. Not a demon, not a god, but something older, a memory given form. It did not act, it revealed, and in that moment, across every unforgiven vessel, every fortress monastery, and every soul still bound to Caliban's legacy, they remembered, not facts, not propaganda, but the feeling of that night, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silence. It was not vengeance that moved through them. It was shame. Back aboard the Rock, the lion sat in silence. He had felt it too. The moment when the veil lifted, not by force but by choice the chapter now knew. The truth would no longer be guarded by torture or fire or lies. He stood. Cassian entered, breath caught. My lord, they have not fired. The fleets are holding position. The lion walked past him. To what end? Cassian asked. If not war, then what? The lion stopped at the threshold. To see if we are worthy of forgiveness, he said, and then quieter, or if we ever were. Back aboard the dread of Caliban, Marnak faced Azrael. What now? He asked. Azrael looked around, at the warriors, at the relics, at the prisoner, who smiled not with victory, but with peace. We bring it back, Azrael said. The truth? No, he replied. The burden. He turned to the others. No more lies, no more masks. We are the sons of the lion, but we are also the sons of the fallen. We carry both, and if that breaks us, so be it. Ezekiel stepped beside him. So begins the reckoning. Marnak nodded. So begins the end. And somewhere, in the warp, the Watcher smiled and remembered, not just the fall, but the forgiveness that never came. When the lion weeps, the void between the fleets was no longer empty. The warp shimmered like heat across the glass of real space, painting ghost colors along the hulls of both loyalist and fallen ships. They had not fired, not yet, but the galaxy held its breath. Azrael stood aboard the dread of Caliban, watching transmission relays flicker with unspoken questions. Messages came from chapters of the Unforgiven, pleas, demands, threats, but no one moved. He had done it, opened the truth, given voice to a silence 10,000 years old. And now he found himself in the eye of a storm whose winds were still gathering. It's begun, Ezekiel said beside him. No matter how it ends, nothing will return to what it was. Azrael didn't reply. His thoughts were already elsewhere, on the rock, on the lion, on a reckoning long postponed. Within the rock, the inner sanctum of the lion was silent. No guards, no scribes. The halls were empty, as though the fortress itself recoiled from what must now happen. The lion stood in meditation beneath the great obsidian statue of Caliban's last tree, its petrified bark coiled with baroque carvings of beasts slain long ago. He looked upon it not with pride, but grief. Not even the Emperor's arrival in his dreams had stirred him as much as what he now faced. Cassian entered, a data cube in hand. He bowed. My lord, confirmation. Azrael has broadcasted the truth to all Unforgiven fleets. Luther's confession, the prisoner's memory, the stasis logs, everything. The lion closed his eyes. The rift is widening, Cassian continued. Half the successor chapters have declared for renewal. Half demand Azrael's execution and the fallen, the lion asked. They are still waiting, because they know I must choose. Cassian hesitated. There is one more matter. Marnak requests audience. He is aboard the rock. The lion turned. His eyes were dim green fire beneath a cracked halo. So the exile returns to the ashes of the father. Cassian nodded. He comes not in arms. He comes alone. Marnak entered the sanctum without escort. His armor bore the marks of 1,000 exiles, scars etched in shame and defiance. Yet he did not kneel. The lion regarded him. You are bold. I am tired. You defied me. I believed in you. A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken decades. You left me to die, Marnak said at last. No, the lion replied. I left us to die. Azrael and Ezekiel descended upon the rock in a storm-shrouded thunderhawk. Samael remained behind, marshalling the successor chapters now caught in division. Ships, once brothers, now stared each other down across silent stars. The rock itself pulsed. The warp trembled around it, not from chaos, but from something deeper, from memory. The past was bleeding through, and it demanded payment. They gathered in the Chapel of Blades, the lion, Azrael, Marnak, Ezekiel, the last of the old, the fractured hope of the new. Between them stood a single relic, the lion sword, still chipped, still unwhole. The lion spoke first. I remember the night Caliban died. The stars were red, the air tasted of ash, and Luther begged me not for forgiveness, but for understanding. He looked to Azrael. I gave him neither. And yet, said Marnak, you did not kill him. The lion's gaze turned inward. No, because I saw myself in him, and I hated it. Azrael stepped forward. We cannot hide anymore, not from what we are, not from what we did. The truth is spoken. Now you must decide. Do we shatter the chapter or rebuild it from ruin? The lion picked up the sword. His hand shook. I do not know how to lead men I have failed. Azrael looked up. Then let us fail together. And perhaps that is how we begin again. Marnak approached the lion. Give me the sword. A silence. Then slowly the lion handed it over. Marnak placed it on the ground between them. We do not draw it in anger, he said. We draw it only when we are ready to stand in judgment of ourselves. One by one, the leaders of the unforgiven laid their blades beside it, a silent rite, a challenge not to each other, but to the sins that clung to their legacy. And in that moment, something changed. Not in war, not in fire, but in honesty. Above, the warp screamed. The Watcher had seen the confrontation, had waited for it, had dreamed of it. But even it had not expected this. The one thing it could never create. Forgiveness. It recoiled, it thrashed, and then it fled. Later, in a ruined chamber deep in the rock's core, the lion sat alone. He stared at the stasis casket that had once held Luther, now empty. Only a single message remained, burned into the wall with a plasma torch. I knew you would choose truth one day. I only regret I did not live to see it. The lion wept, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the rock was silent not from secrets, but from peace. The end of silence. The stars above Caliban's grave burned faint and red, as if even light itself mourned the passing of an era. The system was empty now. The fleets had departed, scattering like ash on solar winds, each bound for uncertain futures. The rock drifted in silence, not the silence of secrecy, not the silence of fear, but the silence of a wound finally unwrapped. Within its hollow halls, the lion walked alone. No ceremony, no banners, no warriors flanking his stride. He moved through the relic chambers of memory, each echo a ghost, each corridor a sermon. The sword at his side was not drawn. It had not been raised since the conclave. Not in battle, not in judgment. That would come later. For now, there was only the reckoning. Azrael stood atop the outer battlements, the void stretching infinite above him. The weight he carried was no lighter, but he no longer bore it alone. His message had shattered the chapter's unity, but also reforged its truth. Some successors had declared secession. Others offered silence. But many, more than he had hoped, had stood beside him. Truth, once spoken, could never be unsaid. He watched as Samael's raven-winged gunships departed, guiding the first of the returned fallen to chapters willing to receive them. Marnak led them, eyes forward, history behind. Forgiveness would not come easily, but it had begun. Ezekiel approached, his robes tugged gently by the artificial wind cycling through the battlements. You look like you're waiting for judgment, he said. Azrael shook his head. No, just wondering if what we did matters. It does. But not in the way you think. How then? Ezekiel looked out across the stars. We did not save the chapter. We ended it. Azrael frowned. You think we've destroyed ourselves? No, said the librarian. We ended what we were. What happens now is something else, something new. He handed Azrael a simple scroll. On it was written a single sentence, taken from the deepest vault of the librarius. To forgive is to fall. To understand is to rise. Far below, in the stasis crypts now emptied of prisoners, the lion knelt at the tomb of Zahariel. The sarcophagus had not been touched. It bore no markings, no titles, merely the winged sword of the Legion. I should have listened to you, the lion whispered. You told me we were fractured, that we needed truth, not silence. I thought thought silence was strength. He placed a gauntleted hand on the sarcophagus lid. I see now that silence is the soil where rot grows. I tried to preserve us, but in doing so, I buried us, he rose. No more tombs. No, more lies. The lion stood before the assembled inner circle. No armor, no weapons, only the robes of an ancient king. The dark angels are broken, he said, by my hand, by my silence, by my refusal to forgive what I could not understand. He let the words fall heavy. Let them break. Let the old ways die. Let those who cannot walk with the burden of truth go their way. Some averted their eyes. Others met his gaze. None interrupted. I do not know what we become. Only that we must become, he turned to Azrael. Your truth gave me back my voice. Now I give you back our future. Lead them, Azrael bowed, not in submission, but in mourning, and then in hope. The new edicts were written not in scriptoria, but spoken aloud in every successor fortress monastery. A new pact, written not in the blood of the betrayed, but in the ashes of the secret keepers. The dark angels would remain, but they would not be the same. The unforgiven would become the redeemed, and those who could not forgive would be left behind. In the deep void, far from any sun, an ancient dark mechanicum construct intercepted the last fragmentary broadcast from the rock. It stored it, analyzed it, then sent it across forgotten channels into the warp. Something heard, something old. It did not approve. For lies, once broken, birthed unpredictable futures. Time passed, centuries perhaps. The galaxy moved on, bleeding in other wars. The name of the Dark Angels remained, but it was no longer a name of shame. They had become a brotherhood of truth speakers, truth seekers. Penitent, yes, but proud. And somewhere, on a lost world whose name none could now recall, a man in tattered robes walked among farmers and soldiers alike. His hair was white, his eyes impossibly green. He carried no sword, but his voice could silence armies, and when he spoke, the stars listened. So ends the silence, so begins the uncertain peace. The truth was never a weapon, it was a wound, and in the wound, healing begins.